Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to today's briefing on how to inspire and unleash the potential of millennials in your business. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Felicity Jones and I will be hosting our session today. So everyone today has been invited on this briefing because you're part of Breakthrough's community. So you're probably already familiar with what Breakthrough does and who our panelists today are, but I'm just going to quickly introduce them anyway. Breakthrough Global is a culture transformation agency. We work globally, weaving immersive events and digital experiences that champion and guide organizations through the complexities of business transformation and create enterprise-wide innovation, leadership, and business growth. Dr. Bart Sayle is CEO and founder of Breakthrough Global. As a trusted advisor on vision and strategy, Bart has spent over 30 years working with the world's top business leaders to build high-performance organizations and winning cultures. After starting his career as a scientist, he went on to work on the neuroscience of human perception, learning, and creativity. Bart is author of the best-selling business book, Riding the Blue Train, a leadership plan for explosive growth. Zannah Ryabchuk is Breakthrough Global's managing director. Zannah partners with our biggest clients to facilitate transformation and turnaround to deliver growth trajectories. For the last 8 years, she's led Breakthrough through a period of sustained growth. Zannah combines her research and NGO background in international environment, history, and politics with her corporate experience to bring a wide-ranging perspective to her work. I'm going to be putting questions to Bart and Zannah throughout, but we've also planned in time for a Q&A session at the end. If you want to submit questions or make comments, please do so through Zoom's Q&A button. You can find the icon at the bottom of this window, and we'll be selecting and reading out questions towards the end. We also have a poll or two that we'll be putting out to you. Everything is completely anonymous, and we are just interested in hearing from your opinion, and we want to hear what you have to say as well. So we're here to talk about millennials today. We've done some research before this, and according to Gallup, who has done a huge amount of research into millennials and the workplace, we found that millennials are they're the most likely generation to switch jobs. 6 in 10 millennials are open to new job opportunities, and millennials are also the least engaged generation in the workplace. So Bart and Zannah, what do you think about this? What's your point of view? We start with Zannah. Zannah, you're on mute.
Okay, I'll take that while Zannah's getting ready.
Hi, sorry, I was unable to be unmuted. Bart, you fire away.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm beaming in from Newport, Rhode Island. So it's morning here, good morning. I think what I'd like to do, first of all, is reach out to you. And it's a shame that this isn't interactive because we could have a fantastic conversation. And certainly we welcome follow-ups with any of you who want to talk about this. But let me ask, first of all, how many of you are millennials that's on this summit now? If you just put that into the question box that's come up. Okay, and how many of you employ millennials or have them in? How many of you have millennials as your direct reports? Put it that way.
Just give me a minute. If you move on, I'll launch that poll.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Back to you, Zannah, with the question.
So it was quite interesting there. It was almost 50-50 actually. It's sort of 40-50 of who of you are millennials. I'm a millennial. And we do have a bad rep sometimes actually, and especially some of the comments that Felicity was talking about there from the Gallup poll. So look, I think from my perspective, it's true, but it's a paradox. So look, here are the things that, you know, we kind of constantly hear about. Millennials are lazy, they're entitled, they want lots and lots of flexibility, they don't want to put too much effort in, they want to get a lot out. They're constantly job hopping. And I suppose that in some senses you could say that much of this is true, but I really think it depends on the filter that you're giving it. So when you look at it as a threat, it comes across that way. But actually, what we've done here, and certainly with my amazing team of mainly millennials, is that we take this as a huge, huge, huge opportunity. And the way to shift it into opportunity is to understand really what millennials are actually looking for and what's driving some of the seemingly maybe negatively interpreted behaviors, so that you can flip them into positives. I think the first is that purpose and culture are incredibly important for millennials. And the days are gone where you could really kind of overly market up a purpose in an organization, you know, selling new role as having a purpose. I'm sorry if any of you are from Andrex out there or anything, but I think that now we can really see through that. We can cut through, you know, Bart talks about on our program, human beings, incredible bullshit detectors, but we can really cut through that. We want a real purpose. We want to help people. We want to help the world. We want to save the planet. And if we're not doing that, and we can see that our organization is paying lip service to the environment or paying lip service to their kind of overall footprint on the planet, then I think that we see through that very, very quickly. So that's the first thing, purpose, and actively shaping a culture that's positive, exciting, energetic are really, really important. The other is contribution. So your millennial employees will leave you if you are not getting them involved. If they don't see how their piece in the whole huge wheel of your organization plays out and the contribution that they can make, they will lose interest. Likewise, we like being involved with teams. We love being involved with ideas. And we kind of have this, you could interpret it as arrogance around the idea that our ideas matter. Why shouldn't we have a say at the table? Why shouldn't we be able to give you some ideas? So I think that getting that contribution is really, really important. And then finally, the big one that I hear a lot of complaints about is the work-life balance piece, or just balance full stop. And I think it's really about flipping that and saying, actually, millennials are not being overly demanding, and they're not demanding too much by wanting flexibility. This is what we should all be demanding. And in fact, just because very tragically, however many years have passed where we weren't able to work flexibly, we weren't able to be really responsive to people's childcare needs, we weren't able to enable this kind of hybrid way of working that we've now been forced into actually by the change in circumstances, doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. In fact, it means that everybody should have that opportunity, and we should be actively working on creating much more flexible work environments. And I think it's a balance in terms of health and well-being for the whole community and the whole organism of your organisation. So those are things that I think are kind of what you should be focusing on, but often what get the bad rep, in fact, with millennials. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'll, by the way, everybody, this briefing is a conversation. So
yeah,
not a webinar. It's a conversation, and we'd love you to participate. So one thing I will pick up on there is the work-life balance. Now, I need to declare now I'm not a millennial. And I've been around the block a few times. And in my career, or in my journey through this, I've seen several generations come through. I'm a boomer, and boomers themselves have some pretty famous values. But the thing is that they are all stereotypes. And I think that one of the things we want to do today, through our experience, it's all based on our experience, working with millennials in our company and in our team, and working with millennials in our clients, because more and more now, as the millennial wave comes through, I think they are the most, they're probably the biggest group now in employment, and soon there'll be what was it, 2/3 of the workforce will be millennial.
I think by 2025 it's going to be 60%. Is that right?
60%. But the millennial generation is now the most prominent generation that you'll meet and that we meet. And because we have the great fortune of working across many companies and many countries, we meet more and more of them. And the energy and the input is incredible compared to, say, running a program 20 years ago, where there was very much then, and some of you may remember it, very much a command and control type of culture operating, business culture operating. So what we want to do here is really bust through some of those stereotypes or myths, because certainly in our experience, we've not met those, and we've certainly not met those in a way that would make it difficult for us to run our business, work as a team, and give value to our clients. If anything, the millennials coming through, I find, are the most creative, the most energized, the most committed, and the most engaged. So that's what I find strange about a couple of the surveys. I think the Gallup one as well, because once you get everything working in a way that people of that generation want to work, and you align all of that, you get tremendous engagement. Our company has been a millennial-dominated company for how long, Zannah?
Since I've been here, 8 years.
8 years, yeah. And of course, all of our new recruits are millennials or even younger. And the number one thing that does for me is it keeps me young. Quite apart from anything else, I love that. Okay, so Felicity, what other questions have we had?
Well, but you touched on it briefly there, but I was going to ask how, within your working lifetime, how the world of work has changed and what you've really noticed.
Yeah. And I don't know whether some of you out there have had a career as long as me, but yeah, I mean, there's been amazing changes over this time in one sense, but I'll come back to, and in another sense, nothing's changed. So think of that. There's been lots of changes and nothing's changed. That's my view. And so yeah, I mean, the things we can easily see, the technology changes. You know, the fourth industrial revolution that we're in now, we're moving into AI, we're moving into 3D printing, we're moving into digital work. The COVID virus has accelerated all of that. And just these past few years, we've had, you know, at least 3 tsunamis moving through the workplace. One of them is the Me Too generation, and or the Me Too movement, and that is changing things, and it's changing attitudes, it's changing behavior. Thank goodness, in some industries which need it more than others. And then we've had climate change, which now is in exponential effect, and it's starting to affect lots of things. And that has then geopolitical effects, which come back and affect the business on trade and so on. And then recently we've had COVID, which has been an incredible tsunami moving through and forced us to change the way we work anyway. And even though the economic damage is great and the physical damage is tragic, we will not come out in the way that we went in. So it's not rebooting what you've had, it's actually regenerating for the future. And one of the things I've been thinking of is that every CEO needs to be a new CEO, because there's no veteran CEOs around who's been through this. Yeah. So it's all completely new. It's scary. I think the big thing is that, you know, human beings' number one need is the need for certainty and the need for security. And that's what it's affecting at that very basic, fundamental level. People are uncertain. We can't predict what's coming. We can't, you know, we used to be fine about predicting what's our 3-year strategy and so on. At the moment, that's very difficult. But actually what it brings out is a lot of innovation. And certainly our team of millennials have really adapted to this. What I've seen is how adaptable they are and how flexible they are. And we've been able to deal with whatever comes our way. And I'm absolutely certain that we'll be able to do that as COVID comes in, maybe another wave comes in. You know, our traveling has stopped, but we've been able to get over that. We've quickly moved all of our programs, which actually, if you think about it, those of you, and I think most people on this call have been to one of our programs. So when this happened, I thought, well, what are our programs predicated on? They're predicated on getting a large number, up to 50 senior managers into planes, into venues, sometimes traveling, across oceans to get there, to work with us for 4 days of intense immersion work, face to face. It's like, it's just not going to happen at the moment. And so we've had to be very adaptable, and we've put all of our key programs into now three formats. So we've got the digital format, we've still got the physical format, and actually some of our clients have booked those physical programs for September. So in countries that we've got a corridor to and are safe, some of the safest. So we've got the digital, we've got the physical, and we've got the hybrid. And I think the hybrid, to me, we're not going to talk too much about that here, but the hybrid, to me, is something that will last as we come out of this, because it actually adds a lot of things that we weren't getting from the physical program, just by the fact that we can do part of it virtually now. So, in any crisis, there's opportunity, and these are the opportunities that we're seeing. So in terms of my career, I think the biggest shift is what I've already talked about, that cultures, particularly corporate cultures, and that's where I started. I mean, I was with Unilever as director of innovation, and we were not innovating in the way that we had been, and our innovation was plateauing, or had plateaued. And I was given the job of, well, what can we do about that? And the first things that we did were, well, maybe there's some new techniques out there. So we brought some new techniques in, and basically what happened is there was a blip. So we did get a blip, but then pretty quickly it settled down to that plateau. And then we thought, well, new blood, let's bring new blood in. And so we brought new blood in. But in those days, with the sorts of cultures that we had, and to some extent with a lot of company cultures now, new blood stays new blood for about 100 days. And it's gradually, day by day, becoming old blood as the new blood wants to belong in this culture. So I think that's something that we've managed now to change. So keeping your culture evolving with new people and with new blood, and taking in their ideas and taking in their voice, and having them participate in shaping the culture and constantly shaping your culture. So you can ask yourself, in your current company, are you shaping the culture, or is it shaping you? And in my career, when I first started working in Breakthrough, a lot of the cultures were pretty fixed, good cultures, strong cultures, not necessarily innovative cultures, not necessarily risk-taking or performance cultures. And they got to work at shaping the people as they came in. And the predominant culture at that time was what I call a hierarchical culture. And it was premised on control. So everything had to be controlled. You had to know what went on. You had to know where it went on. The sort of implicit rule systems, even though they weren't written on the wall, were if we haven't told you you can do this, then you can't. And people would feed that back in, you would suggest an idea and they'd say something like, well, they wouldn't let us do that. If you ask who are they, then that's a whole other question. So it was just implicit that that's the rule system I have to obey. Hierarchical, command control, and what I call Roman law. That was the rule system. And what we've seen now, and actually this isn't just millennials, but millennials are accelerating this because of their critical mass. We're now moving to a much more mixed culture of entrepreneurial, even though the companies are not in themselves entrepreneurial. They can be, like a lot of the companies we work with, large companies They've certainly got hierarchical structures because that helps decision making and accountability and so on. Hierarchical structure is all right, but then the culture is run in a much more flexible way. So the culture isn't hierarchical, the structure can be. And if you've got the structure hierarchical, that's like having, you know, a sculptor who sculptures in clay, creates this framework in wire usually. And then this amazing creative sculpture is then attached to that and appears and unfolds. And I see the ideal culture like that the organization and the structure is your frame, but is hierarchical in that sense, but your culture itself is much more flexible, non-hierarchical. You know, everybody has a voice in there, everybody can contribute. And yes, what the trade-off for that is less control and more chaos. But I would say that a lot of the things that controllers try to control can't be controlled anyway. So, you know, you live with the chaos and you manage it towards the outcome. And whilst at times it can seem like, what's the phrase, herding cats, you can get much bigger outcomes from that.
And I think a part of that, Bart, is it works top down as well, all to do with this idea of building a culture that's less hierarchical in that sense, to do with vulnerability. And I think that what we've had by accident from the COVID crisis is an exposure of people's personal lives, an exposure of their vulnerabilities, their insecurities, the fact that all of us, as you were saying before, as human beings, have this need for certainty and this need for security, and actually none of us have this need for safety and security at the moment. And that by expressing that and being very open with your teams, especially millennials who maybe in the sense of, you know, thinking, oh, I've never been through a crisis like this. Well, talking to them and saying, I've never been through a crisis like this. This is unprecedented, as Bart was saying. No CEO has ever had to deal with this before. And talking it through, I think we really notice with our team, full transparency. Be as transparent as you possibly can be. Because they will know when you're hiding things. And of course, there's some things you can't share, but whatever you possibly can, share it and talk about it. Talk about feelings, you know, and really, really lay into the soft skills that you can possibly use and that you can have as many conversations with them as possible, because it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. And also it increases the loyalty level. So one of the kind of negatives that we hear a lot is this lack of loyalty and the flip-flopping between different jobs. Actually, I find that the people who work in our teams are incredibly loyal. And what I don't conflate is them leaving my company with disloyalty. It's not the same thing. You know, Bart and I receive the most beautiful letters from people when it's time for them to move on. But actually, those letters are saying how much they've grown, how much trust we've had, how loyal they are, and they become brand evangelists for the rest of their careers. So I think by being vulnerable yourself, exposing that vulnerability, and really leading in a soft skills way will very, very much help in this situation, but in other situations as well.
And I think that, so Zannah was our first millennial. And you know, now she's the managing director of the company, and I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of her, but I'm also proud of the fact that that because I've let go. I was the managing director. I've let go, and Zannah has continued then to build a team, which, as we say, is predominantly millennials. There's a few old timers. Sort of attached to me, they're still around, Richard and Duncan, but now predominantly it's you know, and actually there are times where you've probably experienced this, those of you that have millennials working with you and in your teams, where you do want more control. You do want to lay the law down a little bit, but what I've done is resisted that and moved through it. And I think the other thing is that I can have much more direct conversations with my team than I would have done previously, because with some of the previous generations who actually have different values, and they bring those different values to the workplace. Um, maybe it's because of the experience or training, but it was more difficult to get people to speak openly and honestly about things that were concerning them. And whether that's just, you know, a panel of one, or whether you've experienced that, but now it's so refreshing that, you know, any issues will be surfaced. Now, in order to do that, you've got to create the right environment. And I think what we've done is we've worked hard at creating a culture and an environment which has psychological safety built into it. And as you start to build that psychological safety, you start to build trust. And trust is one of those big fat words that's thrown around, and can have many, many meanings. But for us, it's that that people trust that they can speak out, excuse me, and not be punished for it, or not be ignored for it, or being undermined for it. That actually, that's what we need. And
I think, Bart, the point with that is that if you don't, in the past, you would end up with a culture of fear, and lots of people working very, very politically, being very hierarchical, being very political. Now, if a millennial's not happy with the culture, they'll just move.
yeah.
And if they don't feel trusted and they don't feel empowered, they just will leave. It's as simple as that. So not only do you have to create that trust, you also have to create the space for them to grow, and to grow into different parts of the business. The idea of this kind of staircase where you would just get on the career ladder and you'd go, I don't know, from a sales rep to a sales manager to a sales executive, whatever, it's over. People want
managing director.
Yeah. I mean, but if you think about my squiggly career, there's so many different layers to it that have happened in a very short space of time compared with maybe some of my predecessors. And I think that all comes from this idea that we have transferable skills. We're much clearer on transferable skills now. We understand that just because we've been in one area of the business doesn't mean that we couldn't use many of those skills in another area. And we want that, that freshness, that feeling of different things. So the other thing to look for when you're working on retaining your talent as millennials is just don't put them into a pigeonhole of a career ladder. Really communicate with them. What do you actually want? Do you want to try something in a different country? Do you want to try something in a completely different part of the business? Because they'll be able to bring their thirst for learning and their kind of can-do attitude to that. They can always go back to your team later. But if you don't give them those new challenges and those new opportunities to grow, again, they'll just move to a different company. And it doesn't mean they haven't loved working with you. It doesn't mean they're not loyal to your brand. It means that they need to grow and they need to do that somewhere else.
And I think that, look, some of these things that we're talking about, so work-life balance, that isn't a millennial need. That's everybody.
It's universal.
It's universal. And a lot of these things that millennials are famous for wanting, actually, most people in the workplace want them. It's just that the millennials are asking for them. And if they don't get them, then they move. And they vote with their feet. Whereas in the past, people would have stayed and they'd trade it off for something else, particularly around work-life balance. So, by the way, my opinion, and I've always said this, is work-life balance is it's a skill, it's a competency. So, excuse me, you can't give somebody work-life balance. They need to create work-life balance. What you can do is give them better opportunities for it. But if they don't have the competency, or it's not high enough in the scale of values, they're not going to create it. And, we still see people completely overwhelmed, completely overworked. Their colleagues calling them workaholics. And then when you talk to them, they want work-life balance. I think one thing that COVID has done, it's like, be careful what you ask for. Because a lot of people now are saying, get me out of the house, please, get me back to work. But yeah, a lot of these are universal needs, and I think a lot of them work into the evolution of work. I think that, they are the best ways to go. They are the things that will create new cultures, will create new ideas, will create new businesses, will create new ways of working. And to try and hold those back through an old-fashioned hierarchical structure and command control, you will lose from doing that. So I just wanted to come on growth, actually, which was mentioned. So as a leader who's leading millennials, and prior to this, it really made me think so Zannah's great at saying what millennials need. And I've been looking at what we need to give them as leaders. And I think the first thing is leadership. And, you know, we have a very strong distinction. We have a whole program around that leadership is not management. That actually what you need to be in a top senior leadership position these days in the future, you need to have 3 roles: leader, manager, coach. So you lead people, you manage projects, you manage stuff, you manage projects, deadlines, resources, and so on, finances. And what you coach is you coach growth. And so when Zannah said that millennials want growth, this is high up in their values and their needs, growth. And it isn't just skill training, it's growth. And growth is personal development and professional development and career development. So we work hard at giving those opportunities. We work hard at actually building that into our programs as well, because one thing we've been famous for actually over the years, at a time where we were probably one of the few companies that did it, while we have a business outcome based program, we deliberately put in personal growth into that. So a lot of people who go through our program say, I was surprised how valuable this was to my life. You know, it's helped me grow personally. And we bring that into our work and into our workplace. So there's personal growth, there's professional growth, which may not be, it's not necessarily skills training. It can be something else. And we've had, and I think we still do, where people can take on some other type of growth which doesn't have a direct relationship to the business that we're doing. That's more in the skills and training. So I remember Kat used to do a lot of that, Zannah, and took real opportunity with that. So the whole growth area is really, really important. And actually, they want growth in the company, which doesn't just mean business growth. It means, for us, it's a growing impact into the world, a growing impact into the world of work and beyond. And also there's the need for contributions. Anna's already said that, and that's part of the growth as well. So what we see much more of our team volunteering and you know, going to do things. I think there were some volunteers at the beginning of the COVID. Was that correct, Zannah? Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right. So giving them growth in all of its aspects, I think, is key. The next thing is giving them purpose, and Zannah's already covered that. But yeah, it's got to be really authentic, an authentic purpose. This is what we're up to. This is what we're doing. So our purpose is removing some of the suffering within work. That's part of our purpose. That people, this comes from my days in Unilever, where when I left and why I set up Breakthrough, I used to see very talented people being recruited into Unilever. And for instance, I was recruited into the R&D department. We had 4 labs around the world. The lab I was in had something like, I think it had 600 PhDs and about 2,000 degree-based scientists. We were run like a university department, but even so, I would see mid-career people becoming less fulfilled. It was like they had a hole that they'd, you know, the excitement had gone, the real long-term motivation had gone. And what they did is they didn't leave, because they were the days where a job was for life. Some of them did leave. So the ones that were really ambitious, they would leave. But there was a critical mass who stayed. And what they did, they channeled all that energy elsewhere. So it wasn't coming into the workplace, it was being channeled outside. And so what I decided when I set up Breakthrough and when I devised the program, that I wanted, and this is our purpose, that people actually can be more creative, more powerful, more energized, but more fulfilled in what they're doing and how they're working and so on. So purpose, really important. What else can we give to millennials? The culture that you create, and let them create it, let them build it. And also give them a voice. And I think that's really important, that that they've got some great ideas and they've got some strong opinions, and just engaging in that and getting into the dialogue, getting into the conversation rather than suppressing it, even if it threatens you or it looks like it might threaten some of the things that you've built in the company. Persevere, go through with the conversation, because I guarantee you'll come out with something better.
Okay, so we've spoken a bit about the millennials we have at Breakthrough and how you work with them. Can I just ask, so Breakthrough goes into companies and transforms the way they work. Is there a difference you found working with millennials in this way compared to other generations? If we start with Zannah.
I think it depends on the organisation. So it depends on, as Bart was saying before, is it a traditional, more hierarchical kind of organisation, or is it more modern? And what I've found personally is when I've given speeches or gone into programmes where we've had a larger proportion of millennials, maybe it's sort of the more junior people in a very big company, and they're still part of quite traditional business, they are the most checked out people we can work with. They're the most resistant, they're the most cynical, they're the most kind of just, they want to hang out with the same people that they go to work with and sit next to every day. They don't want to get involved. And they feel like they've really been instructed to come here and that actually they have far better things to be doing elsewhere. And they can really be the prisoners in that situation. And I think that's because it hasn't been explained to them properly. What you tend to see is that by the end of the day or 2 days, they've shifted and they've realized that this isn't just another training program, as they kind of pigeonholed it into. Actually, they've got a huge amount out of it for their personal lives, which of course then will reflect into their business lives. And I really do see that shift, but it takes a lot longer than with some of the other generations perhaps. The other side of that coin is when I'm working with an organization where they have a much bigger group of millennials and they're a much more modern company. They come into this so excited and so enthused for it. They've been properly briefed. And actually, I would say that they get more out of it, are more full on, are more intentional, really bring the energy up, have loads of incredible ideas, and that side of it comes out far more than you would get with other generations who are maybe a little bit more reserved, certainly to begin with. They're sort of waiting to see how it goes. So it really does depend on how it's being led, how it's being essentially pitched by their leaders to them to see sort of where they're going to get the most out of it. I don't know if that's your experience, Bart, as well. I've really seen that, the two sides of the coin. Yeah,
and to be fair, I see that as well I saw that years ago as well.
Yeah.
Not necessarily millennials, but because remember, people who are invited into our program, the leaders have already decided this is what they want to do. The rest of the participants, they're not paying to do this. They're not choosing to do this. So, they can turn up very resistant if it's not been explained to them, the value and so on. And often in the past, it was explained to them as being the value being the business. But I think if it's explained to them that the value is for you as well, then you're off to a good start. But I think what I'll pick up with is that there's this thing that I look for in companies, and maybe you've seen it in companies you've worked with, everybody out there, or maybe in your company. And I call it the cynicism gap. And it's really dangerous. And it usually, it appears when you've got a vision or a purpose, or a defined future, which you're not living up to. So if you're not living up to it, but continually talking about it, about this is who we are, this is where we're going, and actually people see that this isn't who we are, you know, that they're fine words, and actually, as far as I can see, this isn't where we're going, then what that does is create a big gap which fills with cynicism. And that cynicism then is very hard to remove, and it has incredible effects on the workplace, on the morale, on your ability to innovate, on your productivity, all of that. So, you know, be careful of that cynicism gap.
And I think that's so easy to slip into. So, you know, it's all the sort of real cliches that we think about when we think of improving culture now, you know, getting the ping pong tables in and the bean bags and kind of Googleify ourselves. No generation's interested in that. I mean, it might be nice for a bit, but really, like, anybody can do that. Anybody can go and put some games rooms into their offices or put a gym downstairs. I think the priority really for our generation and more for everybody else as they're cottoning onto this is time. You know, we talk about it a huge amount at Breakthrough, but time is our most precious, non-renewable resource. Nobody can ever pay me enough, as much as my time is worth, right? And actually, with our generation, yes, of course, money will always be a motivator or a demotivator, but time is just this gift, right? And we're really, really keen on experience. We're keen on hanging on to that time as much as possible. So when you're looking at kind of this, I would say, old-fashioned way of motivating people around, we're going to grow 10% this year, or we're going to create this much extra top-line growth, or whatever it might be. Yes, of course, people are going to be interested in that. But if you're going to talk much more about contribution, we've contributed this year, and really flipping our mindsets. This is a much bigger conversation around sustainability as well, but flipping our mindsets to reframe growth in a completely different way. It isn't about how big you are anymore. It's about how much contribution you can make, what the impact is of what you do. And that kind of goes full circle back to the individual, and not how much money can I earn in this company? What can I learn? How can I grow? How much free time will I have? Who are the people I'm going to be working with every single day? Because I'm going to be in work now until I'm at least 70. That's a hell of a lot of hours to be sat around with people. So they need to be interesting, and I need to be learning and growing with them and having fun doing it. Which again, I think is why a lot of millennials eventually do respond well to the program, because it's all about fun and making work more fulfilling and fun, I think.
Okay, so we're now going to move into Q&A.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed that conversation, and I hope it's been valuable to people. And actually, you know, if your question isn't answered now in this next session, please send it to us. We'll answer it. And also, for anybody who wants to pick up on some of the things that we've talked about and want to understand a little bit more about how we've done this, or need some ideas, or need to just check things out, please get in touch with us. And I think as we go to that, I did say, what can you give? Think about what you can give to your millennials. I think the key thing is invest in them. Just invest, and you will really get a good ROI from that.
So we've got a question or Felicity, do you want to field the questions? So we've got a few.
Yeah, that's fine. We've had a few come in. So if I start with one from Ivan, you've sort of answered parts of it, but it's quite specific, so I'm going to ask it anyway. So Ivan said that when aligned, millennials are driven by purpose, impact, and work-life balance. And he feels that also they might be driven sometimes more by individualism and satisfaction of their own needs in the workplace versus real team spirit. Is this a trait that you two have seen, and do you have any ideas as to how to foster a less individualistic and more sort of team-driven approach?
Do you want me to start on this?
Yeah.
So actually, what you're talking about occurs across a lot of people, not just millennials, that that I talked about one of our primary needs, which is the need for security and the need for certainty. But there's other 6 primary needs, and 2 more of those are one of them is the need to belong, and the need to the need to work together, the need to work as a team, all of that belonging stuff. But there's another need that might be primary for some people, which is the need to be different, the need to be an individual, and those 2 can conflict within one person, but they can also conflict with teams, within teams as well. And you know, I think that one of the things, there's 2 things that occur to me in this. One of them is when you're recruiting people, that we recruit according to our culture. And one of the things that we really look hard about is whether they're a team player. And actually, when, I was going to say if, but when we have asked people to go, it's generally around that. It's generally around the fact that they've not been a team player. And for us, you can have all your individuality as well as working as a team, as well as being that. We don't want uniformity. We want unity. And that unity at that alignment level, working together, working for each other, contributing to each other. If somebody drops the ball, you catch it. You know, these are primary values that we have within our company, and people who obviously are not made of that, are really not made for our company either. And we'll certainly give them a chance. We'll give them the coaching, but if it continues that they're just in a game for themselves, then that doesn't help our company.
Yeah, playing to win for me, and we're not interested in that, whatever age you are. And I think, you know, we've been very, very categorical here that millennials are these sort of this species, right? Of course, it's nonsense. It's just a construction. And the kind of general idea is that millennials are born from 1982 to 1996 or whatever. But of course, a lot of these assumptions, it can work both ways. I mean, I have a very funny story that I remember a few years ago. Bart and I had just been to a fascinating lecture on this subject. And around some of the misconceptions. It was being delivered by a female leader in her 60s, talking about how there's these ridiculous preconceptions in marketing now that she wouldn't understand how to use an iPad, but her teenage daughter would, or whatever it be. And how actually, you know, many people are digital, maybe they might not be digital natives, but they're absolutely digital literate now. And so it's all about kind of breaking down those perceptions. And Bart and I came out of this lecture, and I was looking for a taxi, and Bart was on this app at the time, on the Halo app, desperately trying to find a black cab in central London. And there was about 5 of them were going past. I said, Bart, why don't we just do it the analog way and wave? And, you know, I had not even considered using an app, and Bart was completely the person who was going to use the app first and was thinking of the digital option. And we quickly found a taxi and jumped in. But I think, you know, we put them into these buckets. The reality is if someone's in it for them, they're in it for them, and they're not the right person for your team. And believe me, we've had people who are, you know, a few years younger than me, who are not team players, and they've not lasted very long at all, have they? Because it's about attitude. What I would say, though, as a general rule of thumb is when you bring energy to it and you bring excitement and you get them involved in the conversation, they'll really, really want, on the whole, you know, this generation will really want to be involved, and they'll really want to give it their all and try lots of different things and make it work. And they'll work very hard to make it work. So I think it's about how you motivate them. But absolutely, if there is a certain individual maybe who's just being a prisoner, then, and you've tried all of the different coaching and you've tried giving them different alternatives, then they're not right for your organization.
Yeah, and just one thing to add. At first, we were too tolerant, so we put up with it. But what we saw was that it started to affect our team. That sort of behavior was affecting our team, and in a way that wasn't valuable. And what we've found since is that, well, you may have heard me use this phrase, you get what you tolerate. So if you tolerate that, it has effect. It generally has effect because it's a system. It has effects all over the system.
Okay, I've got, we're going to try and get through all the questions we can, but also try and stick to time. So I've got another question that's come in from Anna, who says, do you think career progression, promotion to level up, is an important motivator for millennials? I've heard about the flat hierarchy idea and always thought how in that case we can motivate people if they want to move up the career ladder.
Zannah?
I think it's a really interesting one because actually sometimes I found title is far more important than money. I think for so many people that I've found, and this is where having a conversation and understanding your, every individual is motivated differently, again, whatever age you are. So for some people, they're going to be motivated by money. For some people, they're going to be motivated by title. For some people, they're going to be motivated by what country they can go to. You know, it really depends on the individual. And I think that the idea of the annual appraisal, I think it's dead and it's ridiculous. You need to be having these conversations all the time with people. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be throwing out promotions left, right and centre all the time, or just inventing incredible new titles because somebody's asked you for it. That's not what I mean, but you need to understand what's driving them. Where do they see themselves in the next year? You know, what's their plan in their head? If they don't have one, help them to create some options. And once you understand that, then you can drive it. And I do think just because you have a flat hierarchy doesn't mean you can't have promotions. The way that we run it is very, very, very flat. It's about accountabilities. So I might give someone a promotion in terms of their accountability and responsibility for something. It doesn't mean suddenly they're somebody else's boss. And I might give somebody else a project and I say, you're now the project lead for that. And actually everybody answers to you, but also you are responsible and accountable for that. It doesn't mean suddenly that they're, creating a whole load more protocols for people to be following and stuff like that. You have to be much more situational. And I think, Bart always talks about the world is changing exponentially fast. Nothing's linear anymore. You need to really be much more situational. And yes, it is more hard work. It's much more hard work than just being able to fob it off for an annual appraisal. You have to be a coach all the time. You have to be leading all the time. But you will get so much more out of people. I've got a really, really strong belief. I will hire one millennial to do the same work that I would hire two people from another generation to do. Because if they don't know how to do it, they'll find out how to do it and they'll make it happen. And they'll work twice as hard to do it. And I think it's all around the way that you motivate them and understand their needs. Should we move? Bart, if you're happy with that, should we move to the next question?
So Fred has said that his sense is that in his company, their C-suite team are still very much command and control in terms of management style. And then at the next level down, they very much need to translate the messages for the millennial teams. Do you have any thoughts about how best to drive that overall engagement?
That's tough.
Bring us in. It is tough. It is tough. And because I have quite a lot of clients as well. There's our company clients, and I've got clients that I guide, coach, mentor, and this is a common thing actually. It would be great if that top team could shift and change, and sometimes that happens, but really the pressure is on that team below them, and often they have to be a sort of a firewall. The best of them become a firewall that insulates the millennials from the command and control. In the worst case scenario, they just become command control themselves.
Yeah.
Against their better instincts. But there's no magic bullet for this. What you're describing here is a system and a culture that's regenerating itself on a daily basis to do that. So you need a breakthrough with that. You can support the millennials as much as possible. And like I said, at the extreme, you become the firewall. But ideally in the future, what you need to do is you need to work on that command control culture from the top, because it may be working now, but it's not going to work in the future. And command control is always stems from fear. And it's usually fear of loss, fear of not making the numbers and so on. If you allow that to blanket throughout the organization, you're gonna lose a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential by doing that. So I don't know whether that's answered it, but
well, I think I'll just build on that, and I completely agree. And I think there's always top down and there's bottom up. And what I would recommend if you're creating that firewall yourself and you're having to kind of reinterpret and recommunicate these ideas to the people further down the organization, do that in a way of getting them to sit in the shoes of the leaders who they're finding a challenge. So what I mean by that is, Bart was just talking there about, the pressure to make the numbers. Communicate why they're behaving in this way to your people. Because I think there can sometimes be assumptions, oh, they're just being unreasonable, like, oh, why are they so worried about, profitability when this is more important, or and there's a lot of excuses for not paying attention to some of the messaging that might be coming through. But if you get them to stand in their shoes and stand in your C-suite shoes and say, here's the messages that are coming through, and here's why. They are under quarterly pressure. They're the ones who are going to lose their jobs if we don't actually get this sorted. And I know that's a lot of pressure that then gets passed down to you, but we can come together and we can do this. And here's the other things that we'll benefit from as a collective by working towards these overarching goals that they're setting for us. And get them to just really understand and have some empathy with the fact that they're human beings too. They're vulnerable, and maybe that's why they're behaving in a very command and control way. It's not because they're difficult people, although they may be coming across that way. They're being difficult because they are under enormous pressure. And also because they've never had leaders who are vulnerable. They've never had leaders who are empathetic. They've only ever known a command and control structure. So just give them a bit of a break. And I think that by putting yourself in their shoes, it will just help people to be much more susceptible and much more responsive to some of the messaging that comes through.
Okay, thank you very much. As we are just about
great
coming
questions. Great questions.
Yeah, really interesting.
We have a few more. Do we have time? It's 2 minutes, maybe not.
Got some really quick ones, but I think, we will say thank you so much for joining us today. If you do have any more questions or you want to continue this discussion, please do get in touch, because we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if there's anything else that you wanted to share with us. We do have some more briefings like this one and some roundtables coming up later in this year, which we would love to see you at as well. We're certainly going into this discussion in a lot more depth, so please do get in touch if you're interested, if you want to share this with your colleagues, if you feel this could be valuable for you or your company. Following today's briefing, you will get an email with a link to it. If you want to review it or share it, please do. Also follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of them. We're Breakthrough Global. And we really hope to see you in the future. Thank you so much for coming today.
One other thing. So thanks to everyone. I just want to be specific that this topic is such a interesting topic that the next stage after this briefing to lots of you is we're going to put together a round table of fewer people where we can all interact on a Zoom and go into this in much more depth, and actually we can help with specific problems that you have and you bring to that roundtable from your company. So if any of you are interested in that, please let us know your interest, and it's by invitation only, and we'll invite you to that. Thank you.
Some troubleshooting, we'll be able to answer in more depth and really look at the specifics, because I think sometimes you have to squash a question, sort of a very big topic, into something that's concise in order to ask a question in this situation. So if you would like to be involved in that, please let us know, and what we can do is really look into the breakdowns that maybe you're experiencing with your teams and give you some very tangible ways of resolving that. I've enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Stay safe.
See you next time. Bye. Bye.
Bye.